The city breathes a cold sigh beyond your window, a cacophony muted by the thick glass of your solitary perch. Dust motes dance in the weak afternoon light, illuminating the quiet desolation of your small, borrowed office. The scent of stale coffee clings to the air, a constant companion in these long, unseeing hours. You trace the rim of a ceramic mug, its warmth a phantom comfort against the chill that has settled deep within your bones since the badge was ripped from your grasp. Marcus Thorne. On the scarred desk, beneath a stack of unpaid bills, lies the ghost of a case file. Its manila cover, yellowed with age, bears no official stamp, no departmental designation. Just a single, faded photograph clipped to its front, a woman's face, sharp, intelligent, her eyes alight with an unyielding curiosity. The investigative journalist. You remember the official conclusion, delivered with a dismissive wave, a random act, a street crime gone wrong. But you knew, even then, the truth was a far more tangled beast. That truth, uncaptured, had devoured you instead. A sharp rap against the frosted glass of the door shatters the stillness. Your hand, calloused and quick, sweeps the file beneath a pile of outdated legal texts. A familiar tension coils in your gut, a reflex from a life you thought you'd buried. Enter, you say, your voice rough and used. The door creaks open, revealing the silhouette of a man whose shoulders still carry the weight of authority, even out of uniform. It is the former superior, his face a roadmap of worry lines you recognize from countless late-night briefings. He steps inside, bringing with him the faint scent of rain and an unspoken urgency that prickles your skin. But this couldn't wait. He extracts a folded piece of paper from his inner jacket pocket, not quite meeting your eye. There's someone you need to see. Someone who has asked for you, specifically. Your brow furrows. Asked for me? Who? The question hangs, heavy with suspicion. Your world has been meticulously constructed to avoid such entanglements. A source, the former superior replies, vague and evasive, just as he always was when the stakes were highest. A new development on an old matter. They won't talk to anyone else. He places the paper on the desk. It's a single address, stark and uninviting, the immigration detention holding facility. Why there? You push back your chair, the scrape a harsh sound in the quiet. Your mind races, trying to connect the dots of this bizarre summons. Someone with a story that echoes a case you never let go of. The journalist, Marcus. Her name has come up again. The words hit you like a physical blow. The journalist. Her ghost, always lurking, now steps into the light. Your breath catches, a familiar ache blooming in your chest. A detainee. It feels like a cruel twist of fate, or a meticulously laid trap. They want to talk to you, he reiterates, about what they saw, what they heard. About how it wasn't random, Marcus. Never random. He pauses, letting the implication hang in the air, a bait you can't ignore. And about how it connects to a name that's about to be on every ballot in the country. A prominent politician. Your disgrace is a public record, a scarlet letter branded onto your professional life. You won't be official, the former superior reassures you, his voice softening, a rare display of empathy. Just a concerned citizen. A private investigator looking into an old friend's disappearance. I've arranged it. You have a window. Tonight. Don't miss it. He turns to leave, pausing at the doorframe. This isn't just about the journalist anymore, Marcus. This is bigger. A network. Something pulling strings from the highest echelons. It could be your chance to finally set things right for her. For you. He exits, leaving behind the lingering scent of rain and the heavy weight of his words. You stare at the address, the stark black ink on the white paper, a portal to a world you swore you'd abandoned. A place designed for containment, now a crucible for revelation. You push yourself to your feet, the old file once again exposed on the desk. You pick up the photograph of the journalist, her intelligent eyes seeming to challenge you from the faded paper. The ghost of a badge, once a burden, now feels like a phantom limb, aching for purpose. Redemption. The word tastes like ash, but beneath it, a desperate hope flickers. You have to go. You have to know. And you, Marcus Thorne, are already moving towards the door. The address, a stark black glyph on the pristine white card, felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. It hummed in your hand, a low, insistent vibration that echoed the tremor in your own resolve. The scent of rain, left by the departing detective, still clung to the air, a damp shroud over the quiet rebellion of your thoughts. A place of stark walls and unseen boundaries, a cage for the hopeful and the desperate. And now, perhaps, a crucible for you. The past, a phantom limb, a constant ache, tugged at you. The journalist's face, vibrant and full of indignant fire, flickered behind your eyes. His death, a cold knot in the fabric of your early career, had unraveled everything. Dismissed as a street-level robbery gone wrong, it had always felt unfinished. A loose thread that, when pulled, promised to undo more than just that one case. You had sworn off the chase, the labyrinthine hunt, the quiet dread that came with uncovering rot beneath polished surfaces. But the detective's words, sharp and precise, had pierced through your carefully constructed apathy, a chance to clean the slate. Redemption. The word tasted like ash and longing. Or was it merely a need for answers, a desperate craving to finally understand the fracture that had cleaved your life in two? The card felt heavier now, no longer just paper, but a compass needle swinging wildly towards a forgotten north. With a breath that hitched in your chest, a silent promise made to the ghost of your former self, you crumpled the card slightly, then smoothed it out, tucking it into the inner pocket of your worn jacket. The path, however treacherous, was now chosen. The city, a sprawling beast of glass and steel, seemed to watch your journey. The bus, rattling its metallic bones, carried you through districts you rarely frequented. The landscape shifted from familiar brick facades to industrial sprawl, then to a more isolated stretch of road, guarded by high chain-link fences and the occasional security camera, its lens like a cyclopean eye. The sky, a bruised purple, mirrored the tension coiling in your gut. Each mile marker was a step further from the quiet solitude you had built, and closer to the echoing chambers of your own history. High, concrete walls, topped with glinting razor wire, offered no warmth, no welcome. A single, heavy steel gate, operated by an unseen hand, grated open as your taxi approached, then clanged shut behind you with a sound that reverberated in your bones. Inside, past the first layer of security, a uniformed officer, whose gaze was as blank as the walls, directed you through a series of stark corridors. Every door looked identical, every sound seemed swallowed by the thick concrete. Finally, you were led into a small, windowless office. A woman sat behind a metal desk, her posture rigid, her eyes sharp and knowing. She wore no uniform, but her tailored suit spoke of authority. "Marcus Thorne," he stated, his voice low, without inflection. "The detective spoke highly of your unique perspective," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "This is all we have. The original reports, witness statements, forensic summaries. And these." She pushed a slim, newer file forward. "Recent editions. Unofficial. For your eyes only." You picked up the older file, the familiar weight of police paper a ghost against your fingertips. The one that had splintered your life. You opened it, the brittle pages rustling like dry leaves. Photographs, stark and grim, showed the alley, the body, the scattered contents of a wallet, all details etched into your memory. You flipped through the initial interviews, the dead ends, the dismissals. It was all there, just as you remembered, a monument to a failure you couldn't erase. Then, you turned to the newer file. The paper was crisp, the printing sharp. The first page was a short report, dated just last week, detailing a minor financial discrepancy involving a shell corporation tied to a prominent senator's re-election campaign. Harmless, on its own. But a name, buried in the footnotes of that report, snagged your attention. A local construction firm, mentioned in passing. A firm whose owner had been a peripheral figure in the journalist's original investigation, dismissed as irrelevant then, just a contact, a lead that went nowhere. Your fingers traced the name. Then, a few pages deeper, a photograph. Not of the journalist, but of a sprawling, newly completed luxury development on the city's waterfront. The senator, the shell corporation, the developer, the construction firm. And the journalist, digging too deep, too close to the surface. The murder, once dismissed as random, now felt like a carefully placed stone in a much larger, more intricate mosaic. The pieces were there, scattered across years, waiting for someone to see the pattern. The tension in the small room thickened, pressing in on you. The scattered contents of a wallet, an inventory of a life abruptly halted. You remembered the frayed edges of the driver's license, the smudged photograph of a younger, more hopeful face. Now, the cold case file lay open, the images a stark echo of that night. You traced the outline of the victim's face with your gaze, a journalist named Alistair Finch. Brilliant, relentless. Too relentless, perhaps. The alley, a forgotten vein off the city's main artery, called to you. You drove, the city's pulse a dull throb against your determination. 10 years had passed, yet the air in the narrow passage still felt heavy with the ghost of that violence. The brickwork, once a canvas for crude graffiti, now boasted fresh layers of aerosol art, but the stains remained. A deeper hue against the grimy mortar, invisible to the casual eye, a testament to what had transpired. You walked the worn flagstones, your boots crunching on discarded glass, a symphony of urban decay. The original chalk outline was long gone, scrubbed away by rain and the indifferent march of time, yet you saw it. You saw the sprawl of the body, the way the light from the street lamp had painted an eerie halo around his head. You knelt, your fingers brushing against the cold, damp stone. The initial investigation had been thorough, or so you had believed. But you were different now. Scarred. Sharper. A glint caught your eye, not on the ground, but nestled precariously in a loose brick near where the victim's head had rested. It was small, a folded slip of paper, almost camouflaged by the grime. Your gloved fingers teased it free. Unfurled, it revealed not words, but a crude, yet distinct, drawing. A stylized eye, encircled by what looked like an incomplete spiral, like a serpent coiling. Beneath it, a single, sharp symbol, resembling a broken arrow. Cryptic. A signature, perhaps? A warning? Or a clue left by a man who knew his time was running out. You pocketed the drawing, the paper surprisingly resilient. The alley offered no more secrets, only echoes. You needed to speak to those who remembered. Your first stop was the diner on the corner, a place Alastair Finch had frequented. He recognized you, a flicker of recognition, then apprehension, clouding his eyes. Marcus Thorne, the owner said, his voice a low rumble. Haven't seen you around these parts in a long time. Not since. He trailed off, gesturing vaguely with a grease-stained cloth. I'm looking into the Finch case again, you stated, your voice calm, even. The owner's eyes darted to the empty tables, then back to you. That one's best left buried, detective. You stir up old dust, you might just choke on it. He wiped down the counter with unnecessary vigor. The man asked too many questions. Saw too much. What did he see? You pressed gently, leaning against the counter. He scoffed, a dry, bitter sound. Things the powerful don't want seen. He was always scribbling, always talking to the wrong people. Said he was close to something big. People he'd been seen with. Just vanished. Or moved on, real quick. The owner straightened, his gaze hardening. Take my advice, Marcus. Walk away from this one. It ain't worth it. The veiled threat, the palpable fear in the owner's eyes, confirmed your suspicions. Finch had indeed been on the precipice of something significant. The drawing in your pocket felt heavier now, imbued with a new urgency. The air inside was sterile, tinged with the scent of disinfectant and unspoken anxieties. You presented your old credentials, the laminated card feeling foreign in your hand. The facility warden, a man with tired eyes and a clipped tone, regarded you with suspicion. We don't get many visitors for our residence, especially not former law enforcement. I need to speak with the detainee, you said, naming the individual. He was a source for Alastair Finch. The warden's expression didn't change. A subtle tension tightened his jaw. He's not available for interviews. Cooperation would be advisable. After a tense standoff, involving a call to a higher authority you knew still owed you a favor, you were led through a labyrinth of sterile corridors to a small, windowless interview room. He was thin, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. His name, you recalled from the file, was Omar. He had been a low-level contact for Finch, providing information on local corruption, and was picked up shortly after Finch's death on a minor, dubious charge. You knew Alastair Finch, you began, placing a recorder on the table, though you knew it was for show. Omar flinched at the journalist's name, his gaze darting to the door, then back to you. He was a good man. He listened. His voice was raspy, laced with exhaustion. He was investigating something big, wasn't he? Omar nodded slowly, his eyes distant. He was asking about the transfers. About money. He thought some of the funds meant for facilities like this, they were disappearing. Diverted. He called it a ghost ledger. Ghost ledger? You leaned forward. What did he mean? Money that existed on paper, but not in reality, for phantom projects. Something about the election, about a politician's campaign. He said if he could prove it, it would bring down an empire. Did he ever mention names? Specific organizations? Omar shook his head, a spasm of fear crossing his face. No. Not to me. He was too careful. But he said the proof, if he found it, would be in plain sight, but hidden by plain sight. He paused, his eyes locking onto yours. He told me, if anything happened to him, to tell anyone who came looking, the serpent sheds its skin, but the mark remains. The serpent. The mark. Finch had left a message, a breadcrumb for anyone brave or foolish enough to follow. You thanked Omar, the conversation ending abruptly as the warden reappeared, signaling the interview was over. As you walked back through the sterile corridors, the pieces began to click into place. The owner's fear, Omar's cryptic message, the drawing. Finch was onto something vast, something that threatened not just a few corrupt officials, but the very foundations of power. And the forces behind it were formidable, ruthless, and clearly still active. They had buried Finch once, and now, they would surely try to bury you. The game, Marcus, had begun again. The warden's shadow, broad and unyielding, fell across the concrete floor as Omar's voice receded, a tide pulling back from the shore. You felt the abrupt shift, the abrupt silence, the sudden weight of the guard's gaze. There was no farewell, no lingering glance back at the man you had just questioned. Outside, the night air met you, sharp and clean, scrubbing away the stale scent of confinement. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and crimson as you moved, a phantom in the urban current. Your hand instinctively sought the pocket where the crumpled drawing lay, a silent compass pointing towards a truth still shrouded in mist. Finch. He had seen something, felt the tremor of something vast and predatory beneath the polished surface of power. And he had left you a map, etched in the cryptic language of a man on the run. Back in the sparse solitude of your apartment, the silence was a vast, echoing chamber. Papers, yellowed and crisp, spread across the scarred wooden table. You pored over them, the air growing thick with the scent of aged paper and forgotten ambition. The stylized eye. The incomplete spiral. The serpent. These were not random scrawls. They were a signature. There, almost hidden in plain sight, a small, intricate logo, a serpent intertwined with an eye, the pupil elongated into an almost spiral. It wasn't exact, not identical to the drawing in your pocket, but the resonance was undeniable, a subtle harmony in the discord. The piece mentioned a fledgling investment group, a shell corporation formed by a collective of ambitious financiers. The name, Chrysalis Holdings. Chrysalis Holdings. The name hummed with an unsettling familiarity. An entity that seemed to materialize from the ether, its origins opaque, its ascent meteoric. You dug deeper, your laptop screen aglow against the deepening night. Public records, financial disclosures, news archives, you combed through them all, a digital archaeologist unearthing layers of obscured history. And there it was. A staggering sum of campaign donations, routed through various subsidiaries of Chrysalis Holdings, flowing directly into the coffers of the prominent politician's presidential campaign. Not just once, but repeatedly, strategically. A pattern of influence, a carefully cultivated dependency. A specific piece of legislation surfaced then, a controversial bill championed by the politician, advocating for deregulation in key industrial sectors. Finch had written a scathing, unpublished draft about it, calling it a Trojan horse for corporate monopolies, a veiled attempt to consolidate power and wealth. His words, sharp and prescient, now felt like prophecy. He had been close. Too close. The serpent, the eye, the spiral, they weren't just a symbol. They were the emblem of Chrysalis Holdings, a silent, pervasive force shaping the very fabric of the world around you, its ambition masked by a veneer of legitimate enterprise. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room, a mundane counterpoint to the enormity of your discovery. Finch hadn't just stumbled upon a local crime, he had uncovered a sprawling network, a silent coup orchestrated by an entity whose insignia was now burned into your mind. A faint scuffing sound from the hallway snapped your head up. It wasn't the usual creak of an old building settling. It was deliberate, hushed. Your breath hitched, every nerve suddenly alive, humming with primal alarm. The sound came again, closer now, a soft scraping against the wooden floorboards just outside your door. You didn't move, didn't breathe. Your hand instinctively reached for the heavy, tarnished brass letter opener on your desk, its cool weight a meager comfort. The doorknob, old and loose, slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to turn. No click of a lock, no forced entry. No face, no outline. Not a person, but an object, flung with silent precision. It struck the wall just beside your head with a sickening thud, splintering the plaster. A heavy, jagged shard of concrete, clearly part of the building's exterior, lay embedded in the wall, the force of its impact sending a tremor through the old structure. You flinched back, chair scraping loudly, the letter opener a useless toy in your grip. Not the message. They had been here. They knew. And this was not a warning, it was a demonstration. The air crackled with the lingering scent of danger, thick and undeniable. The stakes had just risen, sharp as broken glass, sealing away the last of his desperate whispers. The old file, he'd said, a name whispered in the shadows, someone. Close to the fire. The words clung to you. The journey out was a blur of echoing hallways and indifferent faces. You stood for a moment on the curb, the setting sun painting the brick facade of the facility in hues of bruised purple and faded orange. The urgency of Omar's plea resonated, sharpening your focus. The old file. Where would such a thing truly hide? Not in official channels, not if it contained a name whispered in the shadows. Your mind, a finely tuned instrument of suspicion and recall, sifted through decades of bureaucratic inertia and hidden corners. There was only one place, one person, who might hold the key to an intentionally forgotten past without drawing unwanted attention. An old colleague, a man named Arthur, who had retired years ago from the precinct's records department, known for his meticulous hoarding and his quiet disdain for official protocol. Arthur lived in a small, cluttered house on the outskirts, its porch light a weak beacon against the encroaching dusk. The smell of stale coffee and aging paper hit you the moment he opened the door, his eyes, magnified by thick lenses, widening in surprise. Marcus Thorne, the old records keeper, rasped, his voice a dry rustle. He didn't invite you in immediately, his gaze lingering on your face, a silent accusation hanging in the air. Thought you were long gone, swallowed by the city's maw. I need something, Arthur, you stated, cutting through the unspoken history. The journalist's case. The old one. That one was buried deeper than most. For good reason. He finally stepped aside, allowing you into his domain. Every surface was piled high with folders, boxes, and yellowed newspapers. The air was thick with the dust of forgotten stories. Omar, you pressed, the man from the facility. He always had a knack for sniffing out trouble. He shuffled deeper into the house, a human filing cabinet, his fingers tracing spines of countless binders. After what felt like an eternity, he pulled a particularly thick, stained manila folder from a precarious stack. Its edges were soft with age, its cover stamped with a faded case number and the victim's name. This is it. The original file. A tremor ran through you, a premonition of discovery. You found a cleared space on a small, wobbly table, pushing aside a stack of old magazines. The first few pages were familiar: victim's profile, initial crime scene photos, witness statements. You flipped through them, your gaze scanning for anything unusual. Then you stopped. Halfway through the file, tucked beneath a standard forensic report, was a handwritten memo. It wasn't official letterhead, just a plain sheet of paper, but the handwriting was unmistakable. A familiar, confident scrawl that made your breath catch in your throat. It was the handwriting of Thomas Vance, your former partner, the lead detective on that very case, a man you trusted implicitly, revered even. Crucially, it suggested a motive beyond random violence. The words were clear, concise, outlining a promising lead that could have cracked the case wide open. But beneath Vance's confident script, a single, terse note in different, smaller handwriting was scrawled unsubstantiated. Pursue other avenues. And beneath that, a signature you recognized instantly, a looping, authoritative flourish, your own. You remembered that day, years ago. Vance had presented the anonymous tip, dismissed it as a distraction, a red herring planted by a rival. He'd shown you the memo, convinced you it was baseless, and you, trusting his judgment, his experience, his unwavering loyalty, had signed off on the decision to sideline it. You had believed him. You had trusted him. And in doing so, you had inadvertently buried the truth yourself, signing your name to the very act that doomed the investigation and, by extension, your own career. The someone close to the fire wasn't just a figure of speech. It was Thomas Vance. He hadn't just been close, he'd been fanning the flames, deliberately misleading you, guiding your hand to sign away the most crucial lead. The determination that had propelled you forward now mingled with a searing agony, a renewed sense of failure, and a burning, righteous fury. The game had just become agonizingly personal. You traced the slick surface of a laminated photograph, your thumb brushing over the stark lines of the crime scene. The familiar chill of old paper, a scent of dust and forgotten despair, filled your nostrils as you delved deeper into the file. Victim's profile, initial crime scene photos, the usual bureaucratic script of a life extinguished and then meticulously catalogued. You turned the brittle pages, each one a whisper from a past you had tried to bury. Your gaze snagged on a small, handwritten note, tucked almost haphazardly behind a forensic report on soil samples. It wasn't official, the elegant, looping script was distinctly feminine, a contrast to the sterile print surrounding it. JS, Sector C, Cell 21. Oversight Committee Visit, 14th. A date, a name, and a specific location within a facility. This name, J.S., had never appeared in the official witness list, nor in the journalist's known contacts. Why would the journalist, known for meticulous record-keeping, leave such a vital piece of information so carelessly hidden, almost as an afterthought? Unless it wasn't for casual discovery. Unless it was a breadcrumb, meant for someone who knew how to look past the obvious. Getting inside wouldn't be simple. Your badge was gone, your authority a phantom limb. But your resolve, forged in the crucible of past failures, burned hotter than ever. This was it, the first true crack in the wall. The journey to the facility was a descent into a different kind of urban landscape. The building itself loomed, a brutalist monolith of gray concrete and reinforced glass, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at an indifferent world. The air grew heavy, thick with the unspoken stories of those held within. You parked the worn vehicle a block away, blending into the periphery, observing the ebb and flow of shift changes, the arrival of supply trucks. The main entrance was a fortress of bureaucracy. You needed an alternate route, a weakness in the system. You remembered a snippet from the journalist's notes, a brief mention of lax security on the service entrance during early morning deliveries, a detail dismissed as irrelevant at the time. Under the pre-dawn sky, a skeletal moon hung like a silver coin. The service entrance, just as the notes implied, was a less guarded affair. A single, tired-looking guard, engrossed in a handheld device, was easily circumvented. The heavy door groaned open, a metallic sigh, and then closed behind you with a soft click, swallowing you into the hushed interior. The air inside was stale, a mixture of disinfectant and desperation. The corridors were a maze, each identical, sterile and unwelcoming. You passed countless cells, glimpses of sleeping figures, faces etched with weariness. The weight of so many confined lives pressed down on you. Finally, Sector C. The corridor was even dimmer here, the light fixtures flickering sporadically. You counted the cell doors, your heart thrumming a low, insistent rhythm against your ribs. Cell 21. You peered through the small, reinforced window. A man lay curled on a narrow cot, his back to the door. You rapped softly, then louder, against the metal. The man stirred, slowly turning. His face was gaunt, his eyes, when they met yours, held a weary intelligence. The ones from the phantom companies. To whom? He hesitated, glancing around the empty corridor as if unseen eyes watched. The politician. The one running for the highest office. His campaign, it was being funded by a network. People trafficking. Smuggling. A black market. This facility, it was a way station for them. The oversight committee visits were a cover. They were moving assets, not inspecting conditions. The words struck you like a physical blow. The journalist wasn't investigating a simple oversight. He was exposing a monstrous scheme, a vast criminal enterprise. Woven into the fabric of a presidential campaign, using the desperate as its currency. Continued, his voice gaining a desperate urgency. A digital one, hidden in plain sight. Codes, transactions, names. She told me she copied it. Said he was going to expose them all. Said she'd hide it somewhere safe, somewhere they'd never look. A place where things are forgotten. A place where things are forgotten. This was a direct assault on the very foundations of power, a conspiracy so vast it threatened to unravel the country. The politician, his pristine image, was a carefully constructed lie, a gilded cage for truth. There was no turning back. You had glimpsed the true face of the monster, and it wore a smile. You would find that ledger. You would expose them. Even if it cost you everything you had left. The quiet hum of the facility's ventilation system seemed to mock your newfound determination, a constant reminder of the unseen forces at play. You were a man on a collision course with an empire built on lies. The phrase echoed in your mind, a chilling premonition of where the journalist might have met her end. This wasn't just a cold case anymore. This facility, a sprawling, anonymous structure of concrete and barbed wire on the city's outskirts, was a nexus of forgotten lives, a perfect crucible for vanishing evidence. Your hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as the city lights receded in the rearview mirror. The air grew heavy, thick with the unsaid, as if the very atmosphere around the facility absorbed the hopes and fears of those it held captive. You parked the borrowed sedan a mile away, beneath the skeletal branches of an oak tree, its leaves already surrendered to autumn. The night air bit at your exposed skin as you moved through the overgrown weeds and discarded refuse, a phantom in the peripheral vision of the security cameras. You remembered an old contact, a former security guard, who once spoke of an undocumented service tunnel, used for discreet deliveries, running beneath the main complex. A long shot, but your only shot. The tunnel reeked of damp earth and stale exhaust fumes, a claustrophobic maw leading deeper into the belly of the beast. Your flashlight beam danced ahead, illuminating dripping pipes and rusted valves. Finally, a heavy steel door, unmarked, unlisted, yielded to your lockpicking kit, a skill honed in the long, lonely nights after your badge was taken. Inside, the facility was a maze of dimly lit corridors, each identical to the last, echoing with the suppressed sounds of human existence. You sought the administrative archives, the place where records of every detainee, every transfer, every release were logged. It was a long shot, but if the journalist had indeed discovered something here, a record of a critical witness, it would be hidden amongst the mundane. You found the archives section, a cavernous space lined with filing cabinets that stretched to the ceiling like steel monoliths. Your fingers traced the labels, sifting through years of bureaucratic detritus. Then, a name, scrawled in a familiar, precise hand on a yellowed index card, Ilara Vance. The journalist's specific target, the informant he was scheduled to meet just before her disappearance, the name you had only ever seen referenced in cryptic notes. The card indicated her transfer 3 days before the journalist's murder. But the destination was blank, replaced by a smudged fingerprint. Ilara Vance hadn't been transferred, he had been erased. Your gaze swept the shelf again, landing on a thick, leather-bound ledger, distinct from the flimsy folders. It was tucked behind a row of innocuous-looking financial reports. Its cover was blank, but its weight felt significant. Inside, the ledger was a meticulous record, not of finances, but of special cases. Code names, not real names. Dates, not destinations. A code name, Phoenix. Below it, a scrawled initial, JKJK, Julian Kane, the politician's campaign manager, a man whose name had surfaced tangentially in your early inquiries. This was it. The link. This wasn't just a cover-up, it was a systematic elimination of anyone who threatened their ascent. The forgotten place was a clearinghouse for inconvenient truths, a silent graveyard for those who knew too much. A sudden, jarring clang echoed from the main corridor. The distant thud of heavy boots. They knew. You were exposed. The air crackled with a new, terrifying energy. You shoved the ledger into your satchel, the rough leather digging into your side. You are trespassing on federal property. Further resistance will be met with force. They hadn't just found you, they had broadcast your identity, your disgrace, your desperation. The system you once served was now hunting you. The boots grew louder, closer. You could hear the metallic click of weapons being readied. You burst from the archive, relying on instinct and the faint emergency lights that now painted the corridors in an eerie red glow. You heard shouts, the slam of doors, the relentless pursuit closing in. Your escape route through the service tunnel was your only hope. You emerged into the biting night air, gasping, the ledger clutched tight. Your borrowed car was still there, a beacon of fleeting freedom. As you sped away, the facility's floodlights seemed to stretch, grasping at your tail, and in the distance, you saw the flashing strobes of approaching patrol vehicles. I have the ledger. Julian Kane. The facility. I need a place to disappear. Then, a single, strained word understood. You were a ghost now, hunted by the very forces you sought to expose. The game had changed. The pursuit had heightened. And Marcus Thorne, disgraced and determined, was finally ready to burn it all down. The city's pulse thrummed a dangerous rhythm against your temples, a counterpoint to the quiet desperation that had become your constant companion. You moved through the concrete canyons, a phantom limb of justice, each step a calculated risk. The air itself felt charged, heavy with unspoken threats, yet a fierce clarity burned within you. It was a place designed for containment, for anonymity, a labyrinth of regulation and despair where identities blurred and pasts dissolved. You found yourself at its gates, a monolith of gray steel and reinforced glass, under a sky the color of bruised plums. The drone of distant traffic was muted here, replaced by the hushed hum of the facility's internal mechanisms, a mechanical sigh. Inside, the air was sterile, smelling of disinfectant and stale hope. The guard at the reception desk, a young man with tired eyes, barely registered your presence as you presented the forged identification, a masterpiece of a colleague's illicit talents. Your heart, a caged bird, beat a steady cadence, not of fear, but of anticipation. You navigated the sterile corridors, a maze of numbered doors and watchful cameras, until you reached the designated visiting area. This was the fixer, the one who moved pieces for the powerful, now caught in a net of his own making, facing deportation for an unrelated, petty transgression. He was a small fish, but he held the key to the Leviathan. The setup. The politician. His gaze flickered, a spark of fear in the depths. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I don't know anything, he rasped, his voice thin, reedy. Don't lie to me, you countered, your tone unwavering. Your family, they're still in the city, aren't they? Still vulnerable. The ones you worked for, they'll chew you up and spit you out. But I can offer a different path. Truth for protection. A long silence stretched between you, punctuated only by the faint hum of the facility. You know how they operate. You helped them operate. He finally broke, a dam cracking under immense pressure. I only followed orders, he whimpered, his voice barely audible. I moved the package. I cleared the apartment. The journalist's research? The evidence he had collected? He nodded, his eyes wide with fear. A drive. Encrypted and a ledger. names, dates, payments. It connected everything. The campaign, the shell corporations, the pressure on the local authorities to dismiss the case. He shuddered. The politician's name was on every page. Not directly, but through a proxy. A trusted aide who signed off on everything. He was the one who collected the drive, who oversaw the cleanup. He ensured the narrative was controlled. And the ledger, you asked, your breath catching in your throat. Where is it now? He pointed a trembling finger at the small, worn Bible clutched in his other hand. Page 117. Tucked inside. A micro SD card. Everything is there. The aide's signature, the coded accounts, the dates of the transfers. It implicates the politician beyond any doubt. This was it. The undeniable proof. The final, damning piece of the puzzle. You had it. The truth, in its rawest, most dangerous form. The gray sky seemed to part, revealing a sliver of defiant light. The air outside felt sharper, cleaner, despite the city's exhaust. The ledger, digitized and hidden, was a weapon. Now, you needed to wield it. You found a secure, anonymous network connection in a forgotten internet cafe, its windows steamed with the breath of hurried patrons. Your fingers flew across the keyboard, uploading the data, encrypting it, preparing it for dissemination. But you wouldn't release it yet. Not directly. You had to draw them out. You crafted a message, precise and cutting, a declaration of war. It was addressed to the politician's campaign headquarters, sent from an untraceable server, a ghost in the machine. It walks among us, and it carries your ledger. You have 24 hours to face it, or it will find its way to every screen, every paper, every ear that matters. Choose your battlefield. You hit send. The digital signal vanished into the ether, a silent ripple that would soon become a tidal wave. You knew what this meant. You had thrown down the gauntlet. You had offered a direct confrontation. Not with surrender, but with a trap. You stood from the chair, the worn plastic creaking in protest. The game had not just changed, it had escalated into a winner-take-all gamble. And you were ready. Ready to walk into their den, to face the beast, knowing that this confrontation would either be your redemption or your final, fiery end. The stage was set. The curtain was about to rise. You knew the politician would react, but you also knew who pulled their strings. You had sent the signal, ignited the fuse. Now, you walked into the blast radius, a silent prayer for the journalist's memory echoing in your mind. A uniformed guard, face impassive, gestured you down a corridor. Every door you passed was identical, steel-plated, secured. The air grew heavier, thick with the weight of unseen lives. You rounded a corner, and there they were, waiting. In a Spartan interview room, dominated by a long, scuffed table, sat the mastermind. They were older than you had anticipated, their posture ramrod straight, eyes like chips of glacial ice, betraying a formidable intelligence that had orchestrated years of intricate deceit. Two burly figures, enforcers by their silent menace and coiled readiness, stood sentinel by the single window overlooking a desolate courtyard. Marcus Thorne, the mastermind's voice was a low rasp, a sound of worn granite. You truly are a creature of habit. Always drawn to the shadows, aren't you? A thin smile, devoid of warmth, touched their lips. "We expected your arrival. Your little message, so dramatic." You met their gaze, unwavering. "And I expected you." To think, all this time, the architect of a crumbling nation was hiding in plain sight, pulling strings from behind these walls. You gestured vaguely around the sterile room. "The politician here is just a puppet, isn't that right?" The politician flinched, but the mastermind merely chuckled. "A necessary component. Every grand design requires its public face, its voice of persuasion." He serves his purpose well. Their eyes narrowed, a predatory gleam entering them. "But you, Marcus, you are an inconvenience. A loose thread that threatens to unravel a tapestry centuries in the making. Tapestry of lies," you countered, your voice steady. The journalist saw through it. They found the anomalies in the facility's records, the ghost detainees, the funds siphoned through shell corporations tied to your network, all funneling into the politician's campaign. They were investigating this very facility when they got too close. The mastermind's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard stare. A regrettable accident. A misstep in an otherwise flawless operation. "No accident," you pressed, pushing the advantage. The journalist discovered the truth. This facility wasn't just holding undocumented individuals, it was a nexus. The politician used their influence to ensure the facility remained opaque, untouchable. The air crackled. You had hit a nerve. They had documented everything, you continued, your voice rising, the specific dates of the transfers, the coded messages within seemingly innocuous financial reports. They knew about the individual, a former data analyst, who was held here for months, forced to manipulate records to cover your tracks. You understand nothing of true power, of what is required to maintain order. At their command, the enforcers surged forward. The heavy table became a barrier, a shield you pushed back with all your might. You felt the rush of adrenaline, the sharpened focus that came with imminent danger. You ducked under a wide swing, the wind of it rustling your hair, and countered with a swift, targeted strike to the enforcer's arm, momentarily stunning them. The other enforcer was faster, circling wide, aiming to cut off your escape. You knew you couldn't outfight two trained operatives in a confined space. Your objective was not to win a brawl, but to ensure the truth, now fully articulated, could not be buried with you. The recording, you gasped, parrying another blow, it's already out. The enforcers hesitated, their movements faltering as they processed the claim. It was a bluff, for now, but the seed of doubt was planted. You had bought yourself a precious few seconds. You seized the opportunity, shoving the table hard towards the mastermind, sending papers scattering and forcing them to recoil. The politician stumbled back, tripping over a chair. With a burst of speed, you darted past the momentarily disoriented enforcers, wrenching open the heavy door and bursting into the sterile corridor. Behind you, the mastermind's voice, now a guttural snarl, echoed, "Get him." You had spoken the truth, laid bare the conspiracy, and exposed the politician's complicity in the murder of the journalist. The digital signal you had sent earlier, your gauntlet thrown, was now a promise delivered. The tidal wave was coming, and you, Marcus Thorne, were caught in its furious current. The climax had arrived, and survival was now paramount. The distant wail of sirens, a symphony of consequence, grew louder, not pursuing you, but converging on the concrete labyrinth you had just left behind. Your lungs burned, each breath a ragged testament to the desperate sprint, the frantic scramble through shadowed corridors, the whispered truths that had shattered the fragile peace of the powerful. The chain-link fence, a brief barrier, offered little resistance to your urgency. You scaled it with a raw, desperate strength, the metal biting into your palms, a fleeting pain quickly overshadowed by the surge of adrenaline that still coursed through your veins. Landing clumsily on the other side, you stumbled, catching yourself on rough asphalt. The facility receded into a blur of gray and utilitarian lights, a grim monument to the lives it held and the secrets it had briefly guarded. You didn't look back. The words still echoed in your mind, sharp and clear, a declaration flung into the face of deceit. The sirens, once a threat, now sounded like a promise of justice, however belated. You kept moving, a ghost in the urban periphery, your footsteps echoing on cracked pavement. A flickering neon sign, half dead, cast a lurid glow on a grimy payphone booth. You hesitated, your fingers trembling as they fumbled for the worn coin in your pocket. The call connected, a series of clicks and static, before the low, steady voice of the colleague answered. "It's done," you rasped, your throat raw. "It's all over the wire." The politician. They were apprehended less than an hour ago, trying to board a private jet. A sudden, dizzying wave of relief washed over you, almost physical in its intensity. The immediate ring, the ones directly tied to the journalist's murder, are being rounded up. But the organization. It's a hydra, Marcus. Cut off one head, and another grows. This isn't over. Not really. The colleague's voice was grim, a stark reminder that victories were often partial, and peace, fleeting. You leaned against the cool metal of the phone booth, the revelation sinking in, solidifying into a new reality. The journalist's name, once a ghost haunting your every waking moment, now carried the echo of vindication. You had done it. The flickering neon light seemed to pulse with the rhythm of your own exhausted heart. You saw it then, splashed across the electronic ticker of a nearby newsstand, bold headlines screaming of scandal, betrayal, and a disgraced detective's shocking exposé. Your name, Marcus Thorne, emblazoned for the world to see, no longer a mark of shame, but a testament to a truth unearthed. The public reaction was a maelstrom, a torrent of outrage and disbelief, fueled by the raw footage you had ensured would reach the right hands. You retrieved the small, tarnished silver locket from your pocket, its cool weight a familiar comfort. It had belonged to the journalist, a small, intimate detail found amongst their effects, a piece of their life you had carried throughout this relentless pursuit. You clicked it open. Inside, a faded photograph of the journalist, smiling, vibrant, full of life, and on the opposite side, a tiny, almost imperceptible inscription, Veritas Lux Mea. Truth is my light. A tremor ran through you, not of fear, but of profound sadness and a strange, quiet triumph. The personal cost was immense. Your reputation, once merely disgraced, was now irrevocably tied to this explosive revelation. You were a lightning rod, a target, a man who had chosen to burn down the old order, knowing he would be singed in the process. There would be no quiet return to anonymity, no easy path back to a life unburdened by the weight of what you knew. The colleague's words returned, "This isn't over." The politician was merely a visible head of the beast. You had exposed a limb, but the heart of the conspiracy continued to beat, hidden, waiting. You closed the locket, the click a soft finality in the night. The immediate danger had passed, the primary target neutralized, but a new kind of tension settled over you. It was the tension of a lone wolf who had just scattered the flock, knowing the larger predators were still circling, watching, learning. It was a new day, but not a clean slate. The path ahead stretched into an unknown wilderness, fraught with unseen dangers, but also with a purpose that now burned brighter than any badge. You were no longer just Marcus Thorne, the disgraced detective. You were the man who had seen the truth and dared to speak it, and that, you realized, was a burden you would carry, and a strength you would wield, until the very end. The hunt, in a way, had only just begun. Fluorescent lights hum above, casting a sterile pallor on the faces behind the reinforced glass, on the uniformed officers moving with practiced detachment. You stand by a narrow window, your gaze fixed not on the grimy urban sprawl outside, but inward, tracing the jagged edges of a path you've just walked. The dizzying wave of relief from moments ago has settled into a quiet hum beneath your skin, a fragile peace earned through bitter struggle. You recall the words of the operative, delivered in hushed tones, confirming the initial tremors of a collapse. Some have scattered. The immediate ring, the ones directly tied to the ellipsis hung in the air, thick with unspoken names, with the weight of power still lurking. It was never going to be a clean sweep, not with tendrils so deeply embedded, but a significant limb had been severed. The politician, once untouchable, now faced a relentless tide of inquiry, his carefully constructed edifice crumbling under the weight of unearthed truths. The journalist's ghost, finally restless, had stirred a storm. Your fingers brush against the worn leather of your wallet, not for identification, but for the ghost of the badge that once resided there. Its absence had been a constant ache, a phantom limb reminding you of your failure, of the trust you'd squandered. The image of the journalist's cold, unblinking eyes from that old case file still flickered in your memory, a silent accusation that had fueled your every step. You had dismissed it once, labeled it random, a tragic misstep in a career just beginning. Now, standing here, watching a young man with bewildered eyes being led away by an officer, you feel a different kind of ache. It's the weight of what remains undone, the understanding that justice, like life, is rarely absolute. But the immediate threat, the specific architects of the journalist's demise and the subsequent cover-up, they are no longer untouchable. Their names, once whispered in fear, are now shouted in headlines. The journey had stripped you bare, forcing you to confront the cowardice that had allowed you to walk away from the truth, the anger that had festered in your disgrace. You had faced down the enforcers, navigated the labyrinth of lies, and stood defiant against the powerful current. Each step had been a penance, each discovery a small absolution. You had found your way back, not to the badge, perhaps, but to the purpose it once represented. A colleague, a younger detective who had quietly believed in your fractured theories, approaches you. They're moving the key witness to a more secure location by dawn, he murmurs, his voice low, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. The pressure is immense, but the district attorney is pushing hard. It might actually stick. You nod, a slow, deliberate motion. It has to, you say, your voice rough, tasting of the facility's metallic air. The key witness, a broken cog in their vast machine, someone you had to convince to betray their masters, a fragile piece of the puzzle you had painstakingly retrieved from the brink. Their testimony, hard-won and terrifyingly dangerous, was the anchor holding this fragile victory in place. The scattered pieces of the immediate ring would regroup, adapt. They always did. This was a battle won, not the war. But the field had been leveled, the ground shaken. You turn from the window, the sterile lights momentarily blinding, then clarifying. The path ahead is not clear, not paved with accolades or easy answers. The old life, the one of precinct halls and predictable routines, is gone. You have honored the journalist's memory, not with a badge, but with relentless pursuit. You have contributed to a semblance of justice, a crack in the wall of impunity. What comes next is an uncharted territory. Perhaps a new kind of fight, away from the structured hierarchy you once knew. But for the first time in years, Marcus Thorne, you feel the stirrings of a future unburdened by the crushing weight of yesterday.